I'm going to share the story of a kid who vanished into the Washington wilderness back in 2007 and came back 6 years later, claiming something not human. A female Bigfoot had raised him, fed him, and even taught him its language. It's a strange and gripping story, so without further ado, let's get into it. My name is Mark. I'm 30 now. I live in Tacoma again. I work in a shop, I pay taxes, I stand in line at the grocery store like everyone else. Back in 2007, I was 12. Scrawny, quiet, obsessed with animals and drawing. My parents loved the outdoors. We used to camp every summer in the forest near Mount Rainier. That year was supposed to be the same as always. School was out, my dad had a week off, my mom was still trying to pretend their marriage wasn't coming apart at the seams. I didn't understand that part then. I just knew they argued a lot when they thought I was asleep. Camping was the one thing that still felt normal. We'd drive out past the smaller towns, off onto those older forest roads where the gravel hits the underside of the car and you lose cell service. My dad liked to say, if you can't hear traffic, now you're really camping. We set up at a primitive spot, not an official campground. Just a clearing off an old logging road. There was a ring of rocks from old fires, beer cans in the bushes, that kind of thing. It was August. Warm days, cool nights. The air smelled like pine and dirt and smoke from someone's fire way off somewhere. I remember the first night clearly because of the sound. We were sitting by the fire. Crickets, a few owls, the usual forest noise. Then, way off, something knocked. Like someone took a baseball bat and hit a tree. One, then another. Then two, closer together. My dad glanced up. My mom asked, "What was that?" He shrugged and said, "Probably someone messing around, hunters or something." But there was this pause where we all just listened. It was too far to be our echo. It felt like the woods had just turned their head. After a while, my dad started in with the Bigfoot jokes. That was the thing with him. He'd heard stories from guys he worked with who hunted up near the Canadian border. 8'8" man. Glowing eyes, all of that. He didn't believe it, but he liked to talk about it. "I'm telling you, Mark," he said, poking the fire with a stick. "If you hear someone knocking on trees and it ain't us, that's Sasquatch telling you to get the hell out." My mom didn't like that. "Don't scare him," she said. "I'm not scared," I told them. And I wasn't, not yet. The second day, the weather turned. In the morning, it was warm and bright. By afternoon, clouds came in low over the trees. That kind of gray that makes the forest feel darker than it should. We'd gone for a hike. It wasn't anything crazy. Follow a game trail, loop around, head back to camp. I remember my dad arguing with my mom about which direction the camp was. She wanted to turn back sooner. He said we hadn't gone that far. They were talking louder and louder, and I walked ahead a bit because I hated being in the middle of their fights. That's important. That little choice. I was only 30 or 40 yards ahead, tops. I could still hear them. I remember kicking at the moss, pulling at ferns, snapping little branches. Then the rain started. Not a sprinkle. A heavy curtain like someone turned on a shower. The sound of it on the canopy made everything else vanish. My dad shouted something about heading back. I turned around. I didn't see them. Just trees. Ferns. Gray curtain. I wasn't panicking yet. I shouted, "Dad?" I heard his voice answer, but it was muffled, like it was coming from inside a closet. I went toward it, or I thought I did. Branches slapped my face. The ground dipped. I stepped over a log, slid down a patch of wet dirt, grabbed onto roots. I was still calling for them. "Mom? Dad?" When the ground leveled out again, I stopped and listened. Nothing. No voices. Just rain. The solid rushing sound of it hitting leaves and pooling somewhere below. That's when the bottom dropped out of my chest. I spun around. Every direction looked the same. Trunks, moss, dark shapes. I couldn't even tell which way the slope was anymore. I yelled until my throat hurt. It doesn't take long for your brain to start telling you you're going to die. I'd been lost in a grocery store when I was little. That feeling came back, but this time there was nowhere bright to run toward. Just endless green and gray. I picked a direction and walked. That went on for, I don't know. Time breaks apart out there. It felt like hours, but was probably less at first. The rain soaked through my jacket and shirt. My shoes filled with water. Everything smelled like wet dirt and cedar and that cold metallic smell you get before a storm. I tried to listen for the road, or a river, or my dad's whistle. He had his loud two-finger whistle he used when I wandered too far. I never heard it. Instead, I started hearing something else. At first, I thought it was the wind, a low, wavering sound, like someone humming with their mouth closed. It rose and fell, then stopped. Then, a little later, there was a different sound, a kind of sharp, hollow knock. One, then three in a row, from a different direction. I remember thinking, hunters, or other campers. I started yelling for help. My voice cracked. I kept walking toward where I thought the knocks had come from. The trees thinned a bit and I saw old stumps, moss-covered from logging a long time ago. The ground was churned up with old tire ruts from trucks that hadn't been there in years. That gave me hope. Road meant people. But the road was just a ghost. Overgrown, soft, leading in two directions that looked equally wrong. I picked one. By late afternoon, I was shaking from cold. My teeth were chattering so hard my jaw hurt. Hunger was there, but it was the kind that sits behind everything else. Fear was louder. It started getting darker way before sunset because of the clouds in the canopy. The forest changes at that point. Bird sounds cut off. The underbrush feels like it's closing in. Every little noise jumps out at you. I heard something walking parallel to me, off to my left. Heavy steps. Not the quick, scratchy sound of a deer. Not the scamper of something small. Something big, moving deliberate. I told myself it was just my imagination. Then, a branch snapped. Loud. Closer. I froze. The hair on my arms went up. My breathing sounded too loud, like I was going to give myself away. I whispered, "Hello?" My voice sounded stupid in that huge quiet. Silence. Then, from somewhere a bit farther back, I heard that humming again, longer this time. A low, drawn-out note that trembled slightly. It didn't sound like any bird I knew. It sounded like a person trying not to cry. I don't think I've ever been more scared and more curious at the same time. I didn't see anything that first night. That came later. But I knew something out there was tracking me, not rushing, not pouncing, just staying with me, almost like it was waiting. By the time it was fully dark, I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me. I found a big fallen log and curled up next to it, under a tangle of ferns. My clothes were soaked. My feet hurt. My stomach felt like it was folding in on itself. I cried quietly. I'm not proud of it, but I did. I kept calling for my mom under my breath, like she could somehow appear in the trees if I said her name enough. That whole night is just flashes. The cold biting through me. The smell of wet wood. My fingers numb. Every time I dozed off, I'd jerk awake because I heard something moving. Once, there was a very clear sound. 2 loud knocks, like wood on wood. But they were close this time. Too close. Maybe 50 yards away. I pressed myself into the dirt and tried to make myself small. There was also this other thing I don't like talking about because it makes me sound crazy. Between the sounds, I heard whispering. Not words I could understand, just the rhythms of speech. Slow, fast, then slow again. Like someone talking to themselves in another room. I don't know if that part was real or if my brain was just fried from fear and cold and dehydration. The second day was worse. There's not much to say about it. I walked. I stumbled. I drank from a little stream even though I'd been warned about that my whole life. I tried to eat some berries that looked like ones I'd seen before, and I threw them up an hour later. I shouted until my voice went hoarse. The sky cleared enough in patches that I could see sun, but I had no clue which way camp was. Every direction felt wrong. I fell a lot, on roots, on slick rocks, in the brush. By late afternoon, my legs were shaking with every step. That's when I fell for real. It wasn't dramatic. I wish I could say it was some huge cliff, but it was just bad luck and tired muscles. I stepped on what I thought was solid ground. It was loose dirt at the edge of a steep slope. My foot slid out from under me. I grabbed for something and caught nothing but air and leaves. I tumbled. I remember branches slapping my face, my back. The world spinning. A rock slammed into my side and knocked the air out of me. I hit my head on something. There was a bright flash, like someone popped a camera in my eyes. Then nothing. That's where the search teams say they think I blacked out. They told me later they found disturbed ground up there, slide marks. But they never found the bottom. I woke up in the dark, and I wasn't on the forest floor anymore. The first sensation was smell. Wet stone, old earth, something animal. Not like a dog or a bear. Stronger, muskier, almost like wet wool and iron. Then sound. Slow breathing, deep, close. My head throbbed. When I tried to move, something pulled at my shirt and I panicked. I jerked away, and whatever I was lying on, some kind of piled ferns and grass, rustled loud in the dark. Instinct kicked in. I scrambled backward on my elbows and heels. My hands hit rock. The air felt cooler behind me, like there was an opening there. I couldn't see anything yet, just shapes. Then there was a shadow that was blacker than the rest of the dark. It shifted, sat upright, or maybe it had been crouching and stood a little. I heard claws scrape softly on stone, but later I realized they weren't claws, just nails. Thick nails on rock. I remember my first clear thought. Not even a sentence, just big. The silhouette filled a chunk of the space in front of me. Broad shoulders, massive head, long arms. It was hunched but still towered over where I sat. I tried to scream and my voice came out as this broken rasp. The figure flinched but didn't move toward me. I croaked, don't hurt me." My whole body shook so hard my teeth clacked together. There was a pause. Then it made a sound. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a word either. It was like a low that rose up and then fell, soft at the end. And there was this, I don't know, tone to it, like someone trying to soothe a baby. My eyes adjusted slowly. There was a faint light coming from behind it, from the cave entrance, just enough to outline its shape. Hair, dark with lighter patches, thick all over, but shorter on the face. I could see the bridge of a nose, a heavy brow, long arms with hands that hung almost to its knees. I pressed back against the rock so hard my shoulders hurt. I knew, absolutely knew, that this thing could snap me in half if it wanted. It shifted again, then did something I still can't get out of my head. It slid something toward me on the ground. A fish. Whole, glistening even in that faint light. I could smell it. Raw, metallic, river fresh. Its eyes were still clear. The thing made that humming sound again, a little higher this time. Then it put one hand, this huge, dark, furred hand, on its own chest and tapped twice. Ha, it said, almost like it was giving a name. Then it pointed that same hand at me. I didn't understand what it wanted. My brain was trying to match it with any animal I knew. Bear? No. Wrong shape. Ape? Too big. Person in a suit? No. The shoulders moved wrong. The breathing was too heavy, too real. I stayed frozen. It seemed to think for a second. Then it shuffled closer but slow, like you'd approach a stray dog. It nudged the fish closer with the back of its knuckles. It said again, softer. Then it made a series of short, clipped noises like ka, tick, tish case. They were too fast to catch. I don't know when I started crying again, but I felt tears on my face. "I don't want it," I whispered. It tilted its head like it was trying to understand. Then it did something with its mouth that was almost like a frown. It picked up the fish, bit into it, chewed once or twice, then set it down and nudged it back to me. I thought I was going to throw up. The smell, the sight of its teeth tearing through the flesh, the blood on its lips, it was too much. But there's this other part of your brain that watches all that and says, okay, it's feeding you. It could just as easily be feeding on you. I forced myself to grab the fish. My hand slipped on the scales. I brought it up to my mouth and gagged. I don't recommend biting into raw fish like that. The skin is tougher than you think. It tore weird, cold, slimy meat. I choked down one mouthful and almost lost it. The thing watched me closely. Its eyes caught the little bit of light from the entrance. They weren't glowing or anything. That's important. People always say that in stories. They were just eyes. Dark brown, almost black, but with a shine like a person's. When I swallowed, it made this low, satisfied sound, almost like a purr. I remember thinking, if it wanted to fatten me up, this is what it would do. That's a hell of a thought for a 12-year-old. I don't know how long I was in that cave before I passed out again. Between the head injury, the hunger, the shock, my mind just shut down. When I woke up the second time, the light at the cave mouth was brighter. Morning. My head still hurt, but my thoughts were more organized. I took in more details. The cave wasn't huge, but big enough that the ceiling disappeared into shadow. The floor was mostly flat rock with dirt patches. Near the entrance, there were piles of dried grass, fern fronds, and what looked like strips of bark, like a nest where something had slept. There were bones. That part stuck with me. Leg bones from deer, a partial skull with antlers, rib cages. Some looked older, cleaned off by time. Others still had bits of dried tissue on them. And then off to one side, there were two objects that made my stomach twist. A crumpled, muddy baseball cap, a blue plastic water bottle half flattened. They were human things, not mine, someone else's. Before I could think too much about that, I heard movement outside. Heavy steps on dirt, then a shadow passed over the light. It ducked in. I felt that same cold wave of fear, but it wasn't as sharp this time. Familiarity dulls things fast. It had something over one shoulder. It dropped it onto the floor with a thud. A young deer. Throat torn out, eyes still open. For a while, I watched it work. It used its hands more than I expected. It wasn't just tearing randomly like a beast. It made careful cuts with a piece of sharp stone, peeled the skin back. It tossed parts into a pile near the wall, like a larder. Every so often, it would glance up at me. Not checking if I ran. I don't think I could have gotten past it anyway. More like checking if I was watching. That was the first full day. From there, things start to blur together, but I can give you the shape of it. For the first couple of days, I tried to escape. That's probably what you're thinking. Why didn't you just run? The problem is, you don't just run from something like that. Not when you're 12, injured, half-starved, and you've just fallen down a slope you can't even see the top of. The entrance to the cave opened to a steep hillside, dense with brush and slick with moss. The first time I tried to sneak toward it, because I'm going to call her she from now on, it's easier, was outside. I could hear her breathing, hear the faint crack of branches as she moved around. I started creeping toward the light anyway, one hand on the wall. It got brighter. I could feel fresh air. I took one more step and a huge shadow blocked everything. She crouched down and looked in at me, head tilted. My heart hammered. She made a short, sharp sound. Ha! Not yelling. More like a warning, the way you'd say no to a kid going near the street. I froze. She extended one long arm and tapped two fingers on the ground in front of her, then on the ground beside the nest, back and forth. Then that humming sound again, a little irritated this time. I understood, even without language. Stay here. When I didn't move, she ducked back out. I could hear her moving off farther away. Chasing something, maybe. I had another chance. I went for it. I got all the way to the entrance and out into the daylight. The world exploded with brightness after the dim cave. My eyes watered. The slope dropped away steep beyond the lip. A few yards below, it was just tangled ferns and deadfall. I half slid, half fell down, grabbing at roots. My head was pounding. My legs felt like rubber. But I was moving. Adrenaline pushed me. I made it maybe 20 yards before I heard her. Not the slow steps this time. Fast, heavy, coming from above. There was a noise I'd never heard before, a kind of barking scream, deep and sharp, that made my spine go cold. I stumbled, hit my knees, scrambled over a log, and then something grabbed the back of my jacket. It didn't hurt. That's the weird part. With that strength, she could have snapped my neck. Instead, she just lifted. My feet left the ground. For a second, I kicked at air. Then I was turned, suspended, facing her. Up close, in full daylight, there was no room left in my mind for a guy in a suit. Her face was wide, with a flat nose and a heavy brow, but there was structure there. High cheekbones under the hair. The skin I could see was a dark grayish brown. The eyes were deep set, lighter brown than I first thought. She was breathing fast, nostrils flaring. I could smell her strongly now, sweat, earth, animal. And under that, faintly, the metallic scent of the deer she'd been working on. She made a long string of sounds then, fast, rising and falling. I'd describe it as samurai chatter if I'd known that phrase then. It was like someone speaking a language I didn't know, but with rhythm and stress and pause. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the emotion, scared, angry, frantic. She shook me once, not hard, just enough to make my teeth clack. Then she cradled me against her chest with one arm, like carrying a toddler, and climbed back up the slope. That climb should have been impossible for something that big. But she moved fast, grabbing roots and rocks, pulling us both up in seconds. Back in the cave, she set me down on the nest. She tapped my chest with 2 fingers, not gently, then pointed at the ground. "Hun," she grunted. Short, firm. I burst into tears again. I couldn't help it. The fear, the humiliation, the pain in my side, all of it. I think she thought I was hurt worse because her expression changed. Softer. Her brow smoothed a little. She made a low, trilling sound I never heard from her before or after, almost like a bird crossed with a hum. She reached out slowly, palm up, fingers curled slightly, like she wanted to touch my face but was asking permission. I flinched, but I didn't pull away. Her hand was rough, covered in coarse hair, but the pads of her fingers were thick and warm. She brushed away tears clumsily. In that moment, something shifted. I was still terrified of her. I knew she could kill me without effort. But I also knew she hadn't. Twice now, she'd had a chance, and instead she fed me and carried me back. Somewhere in my 12-year-old brain, another thought slid in. Maybe she needs me. I could sit here and tell you every little detail those first weeks, but we'd be here for hours. I'll give you what matters. She fed me. Raw fish at first, which I hated, then bits of deer liver, heart, strips of meat that she'd tear with her teeth and hand to me like a mom feeding a chick. At some point, she figured out that if she held meat near the entrance, the sun would dry the outer layer. She seemed to notice. I ate that more willingly. She brought berries. Salmon berries, blackberries, these little red ones I later learned are thimbleberries. She'd watch me eat them, like she was making a list of what I could handle. Water came from a small stream a little ways down the slope. At first, she carried it cupped in huge leaves or in hollowed-out pieces of rotten wood. Later, when I was steadier, she'd grunt at me and point, and I'd go with her. She never led me anywhere near open roads. Every time I heard a distant engine or helicopter, she'd stiffen. The hair on her arms would lift. She'd grab my shoulder and pull me deeper into the trees or into the cave. I realized pretty quickly that I didn't just end up with her by chance. She'd taken me. I don't know if she saw me fall, or she found me unconscious at the bottom, or she'd been the thing tracking me that first day and night. But when she looked at me, there was this focus, not like with prey. Different, searching, thinking. I was a problem she decided to solve. And here's the part that people always get stuck on. Why didn't I keep trying to run? I did, for a while. Little attempts, moving closer to the entrance when she was busy, taking a slightly different path to the stream, looking for landmarks. Once, I stayed outside a little too long and just started walking, slow, like maybe she wouldn't notice. She noticed. Every time she found me, she brought me back. Not with violence, with this firm, unshakable insistence. And every day I was a little less sure that out there was safer. I heard things at night. Screams that weren't owls, crashes in the brush. Once, clearly, the heavy snort of a bear not too far from the cave. I heard something with claws scrape at a tree near the entrance, and her whole body went rigid. She moved between me and the sound and made this deep, chest-vibrating growl that made my bones feel like they were buzzing. Whatever it was out there backed off. So I learned that as scary as she was also a wall between me and a lot of worse things. Stockholm Syndrome, people would call it later. Maybe they're right, but those labels don't help when you're a kid making choices day by day. You listen to what keeps you alive. The language part started small. At first, our communication was just gestures and tone. She'd tap her chest and make that sound, ha, or sometimes ma. It was like her name, or what she called herself. She'd point at me and grunt something like mock, close enough to my name that I nearly jumped the first time I heard it. She'd point at food and say a different sound. Dea for meat, tick-tick for berries, pru for water. None of this came with a lesson. It was just repetition. She'd hand me something and say the sound. If I tried to say it back, she'd tilt her head, listening, then repeat it slower or louder, like correcting a toddler. My tongue couldn't always make the exact noises she did. Some of her consonants were deep in the throat, but I tried. I was bored, scared, and starving for any kind of interaction. Learning her sounds gave me a sense of control. I taught her too. I'd tap my chest. Mark. then point at her. You, she'd snort, confused, then copy the rhythm more than the word. Yeah. It took weeks, but she eventually got close to Marka, and I got close to whatever she called herself. The best I can write it is Hom. That samurai chatter people talk about, I heard it every day. Strings of syllables, some harsh, some soft, rising and falling. When she was irritated, her speech was choppy, with hard stops. When she was content, it flowed more. She'd sometimes sit outside the cave at dusk, looking at the sky through the trees and just talk to herself. I'd listen, not understanding the words, but picking up patterns. If she glanced at me and said a word while pointing, I'd store it away. Kra when a raven flew overhead, hesh for the cool air at evening, boom for distant thunder. Over months, my English started slipping. I was still thinking in it mostly, but my mouth started to favor her sounds. There are gaps in my recall from that time where I'm not sure what language a memory is in. I know that sounds strange, but language is just habit. Take a 12-year-old and make them talk to only one person for long enough, they'll shift. I remember one specific night that made it real for me. We were crouched by the stream. She was scooping fish with her hands, this quick, practiced motion. The moonlight flicked off the water. I was shivering because my clothes were always damp. A frog croaked nearby. Then another, slightly different pitch. She paused and said, "Chok, choktai," pointing toward the sound. "Frog," I said automatically. "It's a frog," she repeated, slow. "Fra." Then she made this face like she'd bit into something sour. "Chok," she insisted, tapping her fingers, slightly annoyed. I laughed, just a little. I don't know why. The whole situation hit me at once. Here I was, in the dark, with an 8-foot creature arguing about what to call a frog. She looked at me oddly, then, and I swear this is true, she made a sound that was the closest thing to a chuckle I'd heard from her. A short, breathy puff, almost through her nose. We both sat there for a second, listening to the frogs, and for that moment, I wasn't afraid of her at all. I think that's the first time I thought of her as a person instead of a monster. You're probably wondering how long this went on before anyone else came into the picture. Time is hard to track when you don't have a calendar or a phone or even regular human conversation. I learned to mark days in rough ways, number of sleeps, phases of the moon, changing smells in the forest. I watched seasons turn, summer warmth fading to colder nights. The bite of frost on the rocks in the morning, her fur would get thicker. She'd bring more meat, less berries. We'd move sometimes to different shelters, but always came back to that cave. Snow. That first winter, I thought I was going to die. Not because she didn't try to keep me warm. She did. She'd pile ferns and old hides and put me in the middle, then curl around the outside like a living wall. But my body wasn't built for that cold. I got sick. Fever, coughing, that heavy feeling in the chest. She didn't know what to do. She'd bring me water, lay her palm on my forehead, make this low, worried sound. At one point, she carried me, wrapped in a hide, to a spot where the earth was warm near some rocks. Hot springs, I realized much later. She let me sleep there for hours. I don't remember much of that time. Just her smell, the sound of her heart when my ear was against her chest, her voice murmuring in that strange language. When I pulled through, she was different, more protective, less willing to let me out of arm's reach. If I tried to climb or wander, she'd rumble a warning. Somewhere in that first year, she stopped looking at me like a problem to solve and started looking at me the way human parents look at their kids in stores. That half-worried, half-tired gaze of "you are mine, and you're going to get yourself killed if I turn away for 2 seconds." I felt it too. Against my will, I started to need her. I'd dream about my real mom and dad sometimes. My mom's hands making sandwiches, my dad's stupid Bigfoot jokes. I'd wake up crying, quietly, so Hom wouldn't hear, because I didn't know what I'd say if she asked. "Why didn't you go back?" is the question everyone has, and I don't have a clean answer. Some mixture of things. Distance. I had no idea which direction camp was. Fear of what else was out there. The reality that my parents had probably stopped looking after a while and convinced themselves I was dead. Guilt at the idea of showing up after years and seeing what I'd done to them by living. And on top of that, I looked at this creature who had saved me from freezing, fed me, shared her shelter, and I thought, if I leave, she'll be alone again. It was irrational, but kids aren't rational, especially traumatized ones. So I stayed. There were other things in the forest. other ones like her. I didn't see them up close often. She kept me away from them, but I heard them. Sometimes, late at night, a call would come from across a ravine, not a howl, not a wolf or coyote. A long, rising vocalization that ended in a series of whoops. She would answer, but shorter, more clipped. They knew each other, whoever they were. Once, when I was maybe 14, I'd grown taller, my voice had dropped, time had that weird stretchy feeling. We were at a different shelter, a lean-to of woven branches against a rock face. I was dozing and heard heavy footfalls outside. Not hers, she stiffened. Every muscle went tight. She made a low, warning growl that I felt in my chest. The footsteps stopped just outside the lean-to. I could smell something similar to her but sharper, with a sour edge. They made noises back and forth, fast, harsh. There was tension in every sound. I couldn't catch individual words, just the feel. Her tone was firm like number. The other voice was demanding, almost whining in parts. I poked my head out under her arm just a little. There was a shape in the trees, taller than her by a bit, broader shoulders. The hair was darker, almost black. I saw its eyes glint and I ducked back automatically. The exchange got louder for a second. Then there was a thud, like a foot stomped hard, and the other one turned and crashed away through the undergrowth, breaking branches. She stayed tense for a long time after that, staring in the direction it had gone. Then she tapped the top of my head lightly with her knuckles, almost like counting, and pulled me closer. That was the night I realized something that made me feel sick. I wasn't just her kid. I was also something others might want. As food. As leverage. As I don't even know. Whatever her reasons, she kept me away from them, hiding me whenever she heard their calls, taking different routes, covering our tracks in this automatic, practiced way. It felt like being a secret. There were more obvious dangers too. The bear came in my 3rd year, I think, maybe my 4th. Time blurs around then. We were down near the stream. It was late summer again. The salmon were running. The water was packed with them, pushing upstream in slow, thrashing waves. It was the most alive I'd ever seen the creek. Ham was in her element. She'd stand in the shallows, legs braced, arms moving like pistons. Fish would arc out of the water in her hands, flapping, then she'd snap their necks with a twist. I was on the bank, stacking the ones she tossed me into a crude pile. I was bigger then, stronger. She trusted me with some of the work. The first sign something was off was the silence. Not complete, the creek still rushed, but the usual bird and insect noise cut suddenly. The hair on my arms prickled. I looked up. On the opposite bank, parting the brush, came a black bear. Big. Not grizzly big, but big enough. Its fur was matted, water dripping from its paws. It smelled us, the fish, everything. It stopped, lifted its head, sniffed. Then it grunted, a deep chest sound, and started forward, halfway into the creek. I froze. My mind went blank in that animal way. Fight, flight, freeze. I froze. Ham moved in front of me in one smooth step. She let out this sound I'd never heard from her, aimed at anything but the darkness. A roar. Not a human shout. Deep, long, layered. It rattled my ribs. The bear hesitated. You could see it thinking, weighing the fish against whatever the hell this was in front of it. Then, maybe because it was desperate or just mean, it lunged. Not all the way, but forward with a splash, jaws open, teeth bared. She met it halfway, no tactics. Just raw power. She hit it sideways with her shoulder in both hands. The impact sounded like 2 cars colliding. Water sprayed. The bear rolled, snarling, claws flashing. She took a swipe to the chest. I saw fur fly, skin open. She didn't react. She grabbed its neck with one arm and its shoulder with the other and pulled. I don't care what anyone says, bears can or can't withstand. In that moment, she was stronger. Or maybe just more enraged. The bear twisted, tried to bite her arm, and she slammed its head down onto a rock. Once, twice. On the 3rd slam, it went limp. Water around them turned pink, then red. She stood there breathing hard, chest heaving, blood mixing with creek water on her fur. The smell of iron was thick. The whole thing couldn't have taken more than 20 seconds. I was shaking so hard my knees gave out. I sat down on the bank and just stared. Ham looked at me, then at the bear, then made a choking sound and spat blood into the water. It wasn't hers, not all of it anyway. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Then, like it was nothing more than a chore, she dragged the bear up onto the bank and started working on the carcass. That night, in the cave, she was quieter than usual. She had a long gash on her shoulder where the claw had caught her. She licked it a few times, then left it alone. I moved closer, slowly. My hands shook as I reached out. I lightly traced around the wound, not touching it. "Hurts?" I asked, in English first, then in our mix of sounds. "Hesh, pain." That was her word. She shrugged, this huge rolling motion. "Hesh," she agreed, then touched my chest lightly with one finger. "No hesh." I realized what she meant. "You're not hurt. That's what matters." I think that was the first time I said it out loud. "Mom," I whispered, almost under my breath. She looked at me, eyes darker in the dim light, then reached out and put her hand on my head, palm heavy and warm, and left it there a long time. She didn't know the word, but she knew what it meant. You'd think 6 years is a long time, and it is. But when every day is survival and routines, it slips by like water. I grew. My clothes shredded over time. At some point, I wasn't wearing anything but furs and bits of cloth we'd scavenged from old camps or trash dumps at the fringes. My hair grew long and tangled. My nails thickened. I stopped thinking about school, video games, TV. Those felt like dreams I'd had in another life. Instead, my world was, wake up to the sound of her moving around the cave, sorting bones or hides, eat whatever was left from last night, or berries if it was that season. Follow her to streams, to ridges, to hollowed logs buzzing with insects. Watch her stick her arm in and pull out grubs, pop them into her mouth, offer me some. Sometimes I'd take them. Sometimes I'd gag and she'd huff in amusement. Listen to her talk. Learn more words. Teach her mine when I remembered them. Hide when we heard engines or smelled smoke. Once, we watched from the trees as humans in bright jackets moved along a ridge, talking into radios. I remember my heart pounding. They were so close. I could hear individual words. "Too steep. We'll grid this area tomorrow. If he was here, he's long gone." Ham held me back with one hand on my shoulder. Her fingers were tense, tips digging in just enough to remind me. I didn't call out. That's one of the things that keeps me up at night now. That choice, that moment. Why didn't I scream? Partly fear of Ham's reaction. Partly fear of what the humans would do if they saw her. Shoot first, ask later. I'd seen enough of their trash. The shotgun shells, the broken beer bottles, the rusted traps, to know they weren't gentle with the forest. I told myself I would wait. There would be a better time, a safer way. But that moment never came the way I imagined. Instead, it came with loss. The last year with her felt wrong from the start, though I only see that looking back. She slowed down. Not much at first. Just a little more stiffness getting up in the mornings, a low groan when she'd stand. She'd sit more often, watching me do the lighter work, carrying smaller loads of meat at a time. Her fur around the muzzle went a little grayer, or maybe I'm remembering that because it fits. I know her eyes looked more tired. We had a routine where we'd go to a certain ridge when the weather was clear. From there, you could see a long way. Layers of forested hills fading into blue, a white peak in the distance. The wind was stronger up there, carrying scents from all over, smoke, animals, wet rock. She liked to stand there and sniff the air for long stretches. Sometimes she'd vocalize softly, almost humming random bits of her language like she was remembering something. One day, we were up there when a storm was rolling in. Dark clouds on the horizon, thunder far off. The air had that electric feel, like everything was charged. She was extra alert. Her nostrils flared. The hair on her arms seemed to lift. I smelled it too, not the storm. Something else. A sour, musky smell different from her, similar to that other one we'd encountered years before. She made a sharp "hun" and pushed me back from the edge into the tree line. We crouched among ferns. I tried to slow my breathing. Minutes later, a shape moved along the ridge path we'd just left. Another one like her. Male, I think. Taller, bulkier, darker fur. His gait was different. More swaggering, if that makes sense. He sniffed the air, turned his head in our direction. Ham made the softest sound I've ever heard her make. A low, barely more than breath. The other figure stiffened, head twitching like he'd heard something, but the wind must have been in our favor. He moved on. When he was gone, she kept her hand on my head a long time, longer than usual. Her fingers were trembling. Later in the cave, she talked to herself in longer stretches than I'd ever heard. The tone wasn't angry or even exactly sad. It was resigned. There's no good word for it. I caught only a few familiar sounds. Words she'd used about me. Words she'd used when talking about others like her. Hesh, pain, mock, hum. Some word I associated with death because she used it near carcasses sometimes. Got or something like that. I didn't ask. I didn't know how. The actual end, when it came, wasn't a dramatic battle or anything. It was stupid, like most deaths. We were moving along a slope after heavy rain. The ground was slick. I was ahead of her for once, picking my way between roots. I heard a noise behind me, a short, surprised grunt, not even a yell. I turned in time to see her lose her footing on a piece of shale. One of her legs slid out. Her full weight went sideways. She hit her hip hard on a rock, bounced once, then tumbled. It wasn't far, maybe 15 feet, but she hit wrong. When I scrambled down to her, she was on her side, breathing fast. One of her legs was twisted at an angle that made my stomach flip. There was no blood, just that angle. I shouted her name. Hum. My voice sounded high and thin, like a kid's again, not the deeper voice I'd grown into. She bared her teeth, not at me, at the pain. Tried to push herself up, but the leg wouldn't hold. She slammed a fist into the dirt, making a small crater. We spent hours trying to move her. I say we, but it was mostly her. She'd drag herself with her arms a few feet, then rest, panting. I'd push from behind, uselessly. Every time thunder rolled in the distance, she'd freeze, listening, then curse under her breath in that harsh, chopped version of her language. We didn't make it back to the cave before night. We ended up in a shallow depression under some leaning trees. Not much shelter. The sky opened up around midnight. Rain soaked us. She shivered once or twice, then stopped. That scared me more than the fall. Over the next day or two, I think it was 2, maybe 3, the world shrank to the circle of ground around her body. She faded. That's the only way I can put it. The strength that had always been there like a hum around her was just less. She stopped eating. I'd bring her bits of meat or berries and she'd sniff them and push them aside. Her eyes, those stayed sharp. She watched me constantly. Not clingy, not desperate, just taking me in, like she was memorizing. At one point, when the rain let up, she reached up and put a hand on my cheek. Her palm was rough, but her fingers were gentle. She spoke. Longer than I'd heard her speak straight to me, ever. The sounds came slow, like each one cost effort. I didn't understand all of it. Just pieces. Maka, my name. Hum, her name. Got. That death word. Hesh, pain, a word I associated with go or leave. Ta. She repeated that last one a few times. Tapped my chest when she said it. Ta. Then pointed, not at the cave, but out, to where I knew the world of humans was, somewhere beyond the trees. I shook my head. Tears ran down my face nonstop by then. No. I stay. I used our broken shared language. Mock. With Ham. No ta. She closed her eyes briefly, the way my mom used to when she was tired of arguing. Then she did something that cut deeper than any roar or slap could have. She turned her head away. Not in anger. In refusal. She wouldn't look at me until I stopped shaking my head and just sat there, holding her hand. The sky got darker. I don't remember falling asleep, but at some point I must have. When I woke up, the forest was quiet in that heavy way it gets just before dawn. Her hand was still in mine, but it was different. Stiffer. Colder. You always think death will be obvious. A last breath. A noise. Something. Sometimes it's just a missing rhythm. Her chest didn't rise. Her eyes, half open, had lost focus. That warmth that had always been there under the fur was gone. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours. I didn't wail or scream. I just sort of folded inward. My body shook, but no sound came out. Flies came. I brushed them away at first, then I couldn't anymore. The smell changed. That's the part nobody tells you about when they romanticize stuff like this. Bodies, even beloved ones, turn on you fast. At some point, I knew I had to move. Not because I wanted to leave her, but because the part of my brain she'd trained screamed at me. Predators. Scavengers. This smell will bring them. I wanted to bury her. There was no way. The ground was rock and roots. I tried covering her with ferns and branches, but it felt stupid and pointless. She was too big, the forest too indifferent. In the end, I did the only thing that felt remotely like a goodbye. I pressed my forehead against hers, right between the brows, where the fur was thinnest. The skin there was cool and a little rough. I stayed like that until my legs cramped. Then I used the word she'd used with death, the best I could say it. Got, I whispered. Once, twice. Goat. Then I left. People like clean arcs. And that's when I decided to go home. It wasn't like that. I didn't know where home was. I just knew I couldn't stay right next to her body as it broke down, so I moved. Downhill mostly. Followed water when I could. Avoided open spaces when I smelled humans, then drew closer when I smelled smoke from chimneys instead of campfires. I was maybe 18 then, though on paper I was still that 12-year-old who'd gone missing 6 years earlier. Those days blur. I ate when I could. Things she taught me, certain berries, certain roots, bugs under logs, occasional fish I could catch stupidly with my bare hands. I was slower, clumsier than she'd been, but I knew enough not to die right away. I heard humans sometimes, quads in the distance, chainsaws, a dog barking, voices yelling. I stayed away at first. Habit, fear, shame. Then, on the 4th or 5th day, it might have been more, I don't know, I saw something that broke the spell. A road, not a dirt track. An actual paved road cutting between trees. Cars moving on it slow because this was near a little town. I crouched just inside the tree line and watched them go past. The colors, the shapes, the sound of engines and tires on asphalt, it all felt like watching TV with the volume too high after years of silence. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. I waited until there wasn't a car in sight. Then I stepped out. My legs almost gave out right away. The ground felt wrong under my feet, too smooth, too exposed. There was no cover, no ferns to duck behind, just open gray and the tree line behind me. I walked along the shoulder shaking. Every sound was too loud. Every bird call made me flinch. At any second I expected Hom's hand to clamp down on my shoulder and pull me back. It didn't. The first car to see me slammed on its brakes. I remember the squeal of the tires, the smell of rubber, the way the front dipped. A woman got out, middle-aged, hair tied back, wearing a jacket with some outdoor store logo. Her eyes went huge when she saw me. I can only imagine what I looked like, barefoot in ripped, dirty furs and tatters of cloth, hair down past my shoulders, tangled with bits of leaves, skin burned and scarred and filthy. She said something. I didn't catch it. My ears were ringing. "What?" I said, in a voice that sounded rough and unused. "What?" She hesitated, then took a slow step forward, hands out like approaching a spooked horse. "It's okay," she said. Hey kid. Are you okay?" It hit me then, somewhere under the shock. English. Real human language, outside my own mouth. It sounded strange, but familiar enough that something in my chest cracked. I opened my mouth to answer, and what came out was a mash of both languages. Half her words, half mine. I, Mosca. Got. I, home, no. Her face changed. Confusion, then concern, then something like realization. She glanced past me into the trees, like she expected something to step out. "Okay," she said again, slowly. "Okay, it's okay. My name is Karen. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to call someone, okay? For help." Help. That word sat in my mind like a stone. I nodded. Not because I understood what was going to happen, but because standing there on that road, I suddenly felt more naked and unsafe than I ever had in the cave. Within an hour, there were more cars. Police. A ranger truck. An ambulance. Lights flashing. Radios chirping. People talking over each other. They wrapped a blanket around me even though it was summer. Put me on a stretcher even though I could walk. Asked me questions. "What's your name? Where are your parents? How long have you been out here? Do you know what day it is?" "What year?" I answered some, stared blankly at others. Last time I'd checked a calendar, it was 2007. Now it was 2013. They told me later that my picture hit the news that night. Long-lost boy found alive in Washington wilderness. Parents crying on camera. Old search team members talking about closure. Experts speculating about how a child could survive alone for so long. They wanted a story, and I gave them a fake one. The hospital was worse than the forest in some ways. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The sheets were too white. The smell of antiseptic covered everything. Machines beeped in steady rhythms that made my heart race. My parents came. I'd imagined that moment 1,000 times, and none of those versions were right. My mom looked older. Gray streaks in her hair, lines around her mouth. My dad's shoulders had slumped. His eyes had this hollow look. When they walked into the room, they both stopped like they'd hit a wall. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. Then she ran the last few steps and grabbed me, hugged me so hard it hurt. She was crying, saying my name over and over. Mark, my baby, my God, my baby. My arms went around her automatically, but there was a weird disconnect. She felt small. My dad stood by the bed, one hand on the rail, not quite touching me yet. His eyes were wet. Hey bud, he said, voice shaking. You got big on us. I didn't know what to say. I'd spent 6 years with one person who barely spoke my language, and now there were 5 people in the room all talking at once. Doctors pulled them aside pretty quick. We need to run tests. He's malnourished but incredibly resilient. Psychological evaluation is recommended. It turned into a circus. Cops came with paperwork. Did I remember anyone taking me? Had I seen anything? Could I lead them to where I'd been? Reporters tried to sneak in. One of them shouted a question down the hall. How did you survive? Was it a miracle? I said the same thing over and over. Once the therapist and the cops sat me down and told me it would be better if I remembered clearly. I got lost. I fell. I woke up near a cave. I found water. I ate what I could. Berries, fish. Sometimes I found campsites people had left. I kept away from roads because I thought I'd get in trouble. I don't remember everything. It was all technically true if you cut out the enormous woman-shaped creature who'd done most of the real work. Every time I thought about saying, something found me, I pictured their faces. My dad, who'd already lost me once. My mom, who'd spent years thinking my bones were somewhere under roots. The therapists, with their notebooks. The cops, with their skeptical looks. The reporters, with their cameras. If I told the truth, one of 3 things would happen. They'd think I was crazy. Trauma, they'd say. The mind invents caregivers when there aren't any. They'd medicate me, or lock me up, or at least watch me like I was broken. Or they'd believe me, which might be worse. Because then they'd go looking. With guns. With helicopters. They'd tear through the forest trying to find what I'd described. And maybe they'd find one. Maybe that male from the ridge. Maybe others. And they'd do what humans always do with things they don't control. Or they'd sort of half believe, half doubt, which is what most people do with Bigfoot stories. And they'd still go looking, but not carefully. They'd make jokes. They'd stomp around, leaving trash, harassing everything that moved. I pictured Ham's body where I left it. I pictured others like her, watching from the tree line. And I felt this sharp, almost physical instinct to protect them, even the ones I'd never met. So I lied. It wasn't a big, clean decision. It was 1,000 small silences. 100 I don't remembers. A dozen times pretending I didn't understand what someone meant when they asked, "Did anyone else help you out there?" The therapist wrote, "Possible dissociation, possible confabulation," on his notes. I saw the words once when he set the folder down. I didn't know what they meant, but I knew they weren't telling the truth. My parents clung to the miracle narrative. Our boy is back. That's all that matters. The townsfolk had their own ideas. Some said I must have been taken by a hermit, or a cult, or some guy living off the grid who died and left me to fend for myself. Some whispered Bigfoot when they thought I couldn't hear. A few older hunters looked at me with this strange respect, like I'd been let in on a secret club. Officially, the case was closed. Lost child survives by extraordinary resilience and luck. Unofficially, people kept adding their own flourishes. I let them. It's 2025 now. I'm 30. I sleep in a normal bed. I have a phone. I pay rent. I walk past people every day who have no idea there was a 6-year gap in my life where my closest relationship was with something they laugh about on TV. So why am I talking now? After all this time, why not just take it to the grave? Because it hasn't left me. I still wake up some nights because I hear that humming in my dreams. The low, trembling she made when she thought I was asleep. I swear I smell her sometimes, that mix of soil and fur and blood and river water. When I drive past certain stretches of woods, I avoid camping. I don't go hiking. If friends suggest it, I make excuses. I tell them I'm not an outdoors guy. Inside, the idea of sleeping under trees without her there to stand guard makes my skin crawl. I talk to myself in that language sometimes, quietly, when I'm alone. The words are rusty now. They come out crooked, but they're there. Once, a few months ago, I was in my apartment messing around with YouTube, and I stumbled on a show where people call in about encounters. Sasquatch this, Dogman that, all the usual. I listened to a guy describe samurai chatter. The host played a recording of some garbled, fast, guttural speech captured on a cheap mic in the woods. My whole body locked. It wasn't her. The cadence was different, but it was close enough that tears just started rolling down my face. It felt like hearing a voice from the old country or something, like realizing your imaginary friend had relatives. That's when it hit me that if I didn't tell my piece, it'd die with me. And whatever they are out there, whatever they think of us, one of them didn't kill a helpless kid when she had the chance. She did the opposite. I owe her more than silence. I don't have proof. No hair samples, no blurry photos, no bones. The cave. I could maybe find it if I spent months searching, and even then time and landslides and logging might have changed everything. And I'm not eager to walk back into those trees unless I have to. All I have is this, a line of missing years in my medical records, scars that don't match normal suburban life, and a set of memories that feel as real as the chair I'm sitting in. So you can write it off if you want. Say it's trauma. Say it's fantasy. Say a 12-year-old boy imagined a monster mom to cope with the hopelessness of being lost. But when I close my eyes, I don't see a monster. I see her back, broad and solid, between me and something crashing in the brush at night. I see her huge hand, oddly gentle, wiping rain off my face. I hear her trying to say my name in a mouth not built for human words. I remember the day I called her mom without thinking, and the way she went still, like the sound meant more to her than the word ever could. And I remember that last morning, the weight of her hand cooling in mine, the way the forest went quiet around us, like even the birds knew something had left. The last clear sensory image I have from that world is this. I'm standing on that ridge we used to visit, but alone. The wind is strong, pushing my hair back. The trees below look like an endless ocean of dark green waves. Somewhere far off, thunder mutters. The air smells like wet rock, distant smoke, and her. I open my mouth to call her name. Nothing comes out, because I know deep down that if I call too loud, someone else might answer. Someone with her strength but not her patience. Someone who wouldn't see a lost kid, just a trespasser. So instead I say it under my breath. One last time. Hum. The wind steals it, carries it out over the trees. For a second, just a heartbeat, I think I hear a distant answering hum. Then it's just the wind and the memory of a hand on my shoulder, guiding me away from the edge. That's all I've got for you. Do whatever you want with it. But the next time you're out in those woods and you hear knocks you can't explain, or chatter that sounds almost like a language, or a low hum that makes the hair on your arm stand up, maybe don't reach for your gun right away. Maybe remember there's a kid out there, somewhere in the past, who survived because one of those monsters decided not to let him die. And maybe, just maybe, there's another one sitting in a cave right now, listening to the rain and wondering why the last small human she took in never came back.